You've killed
So I killed a
trees.
tree.
You have killed trees. Luckily, we don't have ants, so the trees can't kill you. All right, so your papers are here, the ones that have been sent so far. Wait a minute, I thought I changed that. Oh well. Okay. So we're going to do final prep and lanyap. Lanyap, for those of you who are not from Nolans, means a little something extra.
Little chicken bite.
Not necessarily. But if you get a piece of fish, there's a certain amount that's in your order, they will add a little lanyap, little something extra. Pass it along, all right? So this is the last class because we don't do finals on television. So the PowerPoints that are up now will be on the final with some lanyap, a little something extra for your practice. Somebody told me, when is the book coming out? Like, yeah. The class is the book.
Let me get on that.
I'll get on that as soon as I have a spare moment.
We decided you should teach sociology.
Yeah.
Psychology.
Well, yeah, I think I should too, but the psych department here doesn't think that.
Well, that's terrible.
Well, I operate in counseling, and that's why the psych department here is all non-therapists, which is certainly crazy, but I won't go into it beyond what I've said.
Your African culture classes is fun to watch.
Was that a conscious decision?
You actually want an answer to that?
Yeah, like did they decide to have non-efficient?
There's a history behind that.
Oh,
And the history was, people can get psychology degrees for a variety of reasons. So people will often do it either to work out their own stuff, which like in addictions, people have a history, want to work out their own stuff and give back. So people who have underlying psych problems will go into psychology to see how the mind works and may or may not like therapists. And some people want to get trained to be therapists to help other people out while they're helping their own problems out or whatever, right? So within that particular framework, there was once a head of the department, social science, that had psychology degrees but was anti-therapist. So being the hiring authority, you can select who gets in and who gets out. So, the psych department here had decided that they have a academic psychology focus. So there are no degree institutions in academic psychology, right? It simply means psychology that's practiced in academic institutions, which means you could just teach theory or you could train therapists, right? Because both those things happen, right? But they're not therapists, and they're just teaching straight psychology. So any one of us who are therapists could teach a basic psych class. That's no big deal, but we're teaching applications because most of the people that are teaching applications. So I'm on the list to teach those classes, but they'll probably never select me to teach them as a matter of practice. Now, they don't say explicitly we don't like therapists, but coincidentally, none of them are therapists, and the therapists that are on the list to teach the classes never get to teach the classes. Hence, I came over to counseling, created this designation, counseling psychology, because it existed, because you can get a doctorate in counseling psychology from the U of O, and the people that have had counseling psychology doctorates trying to teach the basic psych classes have been barred by the non-therapists. Oh, you're not in academic psychology, it's counseling psychology. Well, no, academic psychology is not a barrier. Right? Kind of like that. So it's just like a little interesting game.
It's like red tape to me.
Yes, so I am a therapist, so their counseling psych designation, we just borrowed it. Counseling department, boom, we're therapists, they're not. That's the way it goes. But that distinction is hidden to students. And now I've outed it. Now you've seen what goes beyond the curtain. So, what you've gotten and what's in the lanyap for, because we only basically go through about 20 slides per class, and then I've also on midterm, so we'll go over that towards the end, is both Western and multicultural science, which will help you answer some of the stuff that's on the final. So the final's half of the midterm is the first half of the final, right? All right, so about your writing, and this is a thing that I bring up all the time, so don't necessarily take it personally. Learn your terms and letters. Beware of the tendency towards best guessing in your writing. Best guess or spell check spelling errors, like where you spell a word that isn't right and you ignore spell check when it says it's wrong, or spell check won't give, it's spelled correctly, but it's the wrong word. So right spelling, but wrong word is still bad spelling. This will hurt you in your charting if you're working for somebody that requires you to, wait, you just came from college. How did you get to write like this? All right, so impatient and impatient, these are some past, right? Reeked, which is a smell. Wreaked, which is an action, usually like wreaking havoc, right? Here, there.
Those I do.
Right? I mean, homonyms, okay. Look, it's okay. But where, diagnosis, diagnosed. There's more, but all right, I could go on. But you get the idea, right? You get the idea, my dears.
And I wonder why people think the English language is so hard to learn.
It is. It is hard to learn for English speakers. So y'all supposed to know the way it's supposed to be. Right? You do know that. So, because you educated and all speaking technical English and stuff. So I've had clients, speak English. I am. Neurotransmitter is English. Right? And would it absolutely kill you to be able to learn all the science names, generic names, trade names, and the street names of all the commonly used pharmaceuticals and street drugs and their bootleg versions? Would it kill you? No. But you got to know that. I'm just saying. We didn't get into that here. Could have. But it's complicated enough, right? You notice I pack in a lot of stuff.
Really? Did you see my head turn around?
I'm just saying. All right? So, is it too much to know which of the nearly 800 plus, but I'll settle for 80 because the 80 out of the 800 indigenous plants that basically the pharmaceuticals came from. That came from Native American culture. Right? 800, of which 80 are in use. All right? So you eat foxglove. We use digitalis. We don't eat white willow bark. We use salicylic acid or aspirin. We don't take tar from Oklahoma. We refine it and make Vaseline. Okay? So, the original languages, medicinal and ceremonial usage, pre-addiction. What did your folks who weren't indigenously challenged do? So, the Western civilized people tend to be indigenously challenged. Not very much in connection and in touch with your pre-Western civilization before 800 years ago. But they exist somewhere. The old school. So that internal balance, like that graphic I was showing the other day about bicycling, internal balance develops a physical skill, like bicycling develops a physical skill of balance while moving through different terrain and climate. Breath awareness develops the skill of internal balance of the mind and emotions. So do you see the itch of addiction, or do you soothe the skin of the emotions with breath's lotion? I do have a poetic license, so I can say stuff like that. So last class, we talked about from Angie Arian's book, The Fourfold Way, about the fourfold human self, which basically took, even though she doesn't necessarily follow this particular construct, the fourfold way, in her mind, basically talks about four archetypal roles that humans take: warrior, healer, visionary, and teacher. So, from Native American indigenous practitioners of natural mind, divide the human being into four aspects: mind, spirit, body, and emotions. They're actually one, but they divide them to talk about them as a teaching tool. And the breath technique, for example, when I was talking about the 2-to-1 or 1-to-2 resonance breath, it's all aspects simultaneously. So, for example, a healthy culture would have taught you this at the same time you were taught basic hygiene, like brushing and flossing and wiping yourself and all that kind of stuff. Right? So this is mental, emotional hygiene. So at the same time we're teaching the 2-year-olds to use your words, we could teach people, watch your breath. Okay? If you're in a confusing situation, it always helps to breathe slower. And that particular pattern of 4 breaths a minute is a useful place to start. When you are with others, watch your mouth. When you are alone, watch your mind. All right, so that which makes us strong. So breath is a way of aligning and balancing the mind with the spirit, or that which gives or brings life. Your mind is partly how you begin to understand how things work. So, for example, Einstein's famous equation, energy and matter, the same thing moving at different speeds. Energy is matter moving faster. So your spirit, so to speak, within this framework is energy animating matter. When your spirit is gone, your body dies. When your soul after is not the subject of this class, even though we were talking about death the other day. There are native frameworks which give you techniques for negotiating or preparing for the transition before you actually do, as part of mental health. We don't go into that in this class. So your mind is energy animating your physical brain. Your emotions are partially energy and partially based on the physical chemicals, the neurotransmitters, neurohormones, etc. Your physical body is both the hardware built by DNA and the software that goes along with DNA. That's basically system memory of every organism in your genetic line. So most of the time, this culture doesn't teach you to be aware of the relationship between your physical body and the energies that animate it or run through it. That's why I always encourage mind-body disciplines, particularly from cultures that are older than America, that teach you how to do that as a tool for self-control. Self-mastery, really.
You know, that's interesting because I had heard, I don't know if this is true, I had heard because of the DNA in all of our cells that if we connected them, we could go around the sun 16 times.
Sure. And each individual DNA strand is 6 feet tall if you unraveled it. But yes, that is possible and probably true. So one of the things in terms of dealing with cravings, because I'm not just giving you this obviously just because I feel like being woo-woo. But most of the time in terms of, because I'm a transpersonalist, and so for us the beyond exists and we can talk about it. And the reason that you want to go beyond is because most people, especially in addiction, are troubled by cravings. If your culture doesn't teach you how to control the mind, or that control of the mind is possible, then cravings are a big issue for you. Because, like on this slide, most people simply think they are their impulses and emotions and drives, that's their identity, instead of the fact that they have those things, emotions, impulses, and drives, and at a certain point, they can not only choose to control them, but exist apart from them as if they're happening to somebody else and not be a mental illness when that's happening. Oh, I have this desire for salt peanuts that's being driven by, I'm kind of pissed off right now. Why does salt make me want to shut down? What am I trying to shut down? What should I do? Maybe I should take a walk and hydrate. Okay, that's part of my inner dialogue. So, example, if you're potty trained, you can hold it unless medical condition. For example, so if you're hungry, horny, lonely, angry, you can also hold it and also let those go too. So, using mind-body discipline can assist you with cravings, rewire neural circuitry, and assist and support lifestyle changes. So not simply exercise, but a discipline with a lineage that focuses on personal, multi-level development. Now, not suggesting you become capoeiristas. That's what that is. The Brazilian, Afro-Brazilian karate, if you want to call it that. That looks like breakdancing, but actually breakdancing takes its moves from capoeira. Okay? The industry standard of medication, I suggest, martial arts among other things, or a mind-body discipline, because of the industry standard of medication without skill building. Part of the skill building is what we've learned about conscientious exam, learning to perceive oppressive systems and doing something about them as they affect you. Conscientious exam is Brazilian Portuguese, and it basically comes out of this African martial art, which basically requires that you take a point of view that's upside down from the mainstream, and you can employ capoeira. Capoeira was also used to take over slave ships, used by slaves to take over slave ships while in chains. Yes?
And I'm just kind of, it's a little off basis, but I'm just kind of hitting on the exercise part. I had really, really horrible experiences for years. I mean, to the point where I was hospitalized monthly for days at a time, hooked up to morphine, the whole, and I almost feeling, once I was released from the hospital, feeling worse, because just all the trauma and shit that my body just gone through from this one hormone being released. So, and through high school, I never had any kind of problems like this, because I was always a very athletic, healthy person. And my mom, while I was laying in the hospital bed, she heard a commercial for a clinic in Charles for roller derby. And my mom said, Courtney, you've got to find a way to get out of here. It's in 2 days. You got to find a way to get released so you can go to this. I got released the day.
Roller derby is therapy?
I swear I got released the day of tryouts. I was still higher than a kite. My face was the color of your shirt from the morphine, trying to stay on my skates and do everything they were asking me to do. But in 5 years, I have not assisted.
Okay.
Since changing my lifestyle to, drinking tons of water, getting great exercise, changing my diet to where it's healthy stuff and it's regular. It's not just, I think I'm hungry now. I think I'm hungry now. It's a set routine, and your body's like, thank you so much.
So there is some value to
Beating the crap out of each other on skates, you bet.
not more generalizing it to regular heavy exercise, hydration, and conscious attention to diet.
Absolutely.
As a strategy, yeah.
I would definitely agree with that.
So I didn't give you this as an assignment, but a biopsychosocial spiritual recon would look something like, so biological, psychological, social, and spiritual, which would basically be the energetic relationship to the rest of the universe. Being able to answer, like we talked about on Tuesday, what's your mission? What's your life mission? Be about it. Okay, you're in a matrix of multidimensional energies. The energy itself is multidimensional. So tune into that. So quantum physics, of course, is the study of energetic relationships. We are basically part of a matrix of such forces that can expand our awareness and practice beyond being skin-encapsulated beings. So as an example, there we go. This is from the Buddhist tradition. 4 lines. Thus shall ye think of all this fleeting world. A star at dawn, a bubble in a stream, a flash of lightning in a summer cloud, a flickering lamp, a phantom and a dream. The Diamond Sutra. For those of you who follow the Abrahamic religions, this is the Aramaic phrase that got translated into English as pray in my name. If you break it down from Aramaic, shala, prayer, basically means to create an opening, to trap a stance towards life that's full of awe. Now, when you're full of awe, you don't say anything. And it's often in private, or if you're in a group that's in awe, something is blowing your collective mind and you ain't saying nothing. So it's not to say words. It's not to be verbal at all. And then Shem, and in Hebrew and Aramaic, that word Shem, my name, is not just a person, it's the way I'm doing it, the rhythm, by the light that I'm seeing it, and the atmosphere, which is not just, you don't see the atmosphere, but you can feel the vibe. Okay, so what's the rhythm? Slow. It's the illumination, inner light. The atmosphere, the feeling, limbic resonance, if you will. The word in this language, sacred unity, alaha. So transpersonal vocabulary in languages that are designed to be transpersonal. Heb, in the phrase that's translated into English as love your enemy, aheb, lab wel babakun, aheb is the form of love which is transpersonal. It's already beyond a person. In order to love your enemy, you actually have to see into your heart. In order to do that, you have to see in your own first. So when we're talking about a counseling relationship, particularly when you have to be in a counseling relationship with, as I have to be, with skinheads. Okay? Look, I know you don't like my politics, and we certainly aren't going to agree about, whether Obama's a good thing. That ain't about that. You had 540s and you got gang raped. So let's deal with your HIV status. And in fact, you have to go to Buckley House and there's probably Jews there. So guess what? You're going to have to deal with that. Because I need to walk you through this process and make sure that you get through it. So I need to know what you're afraid of, even if it's not my fear. So the love that's being talked about is beyond my fears. I have to know what your fears are and walk you through them with confidence. So it's that kind of love. It's not turn the other cheek. No. It's harder than turning the other cheek. You actually have to be able to do that, and they actually have to feel. It's not, they don't care how much you know. They want to know how much you care. And you have to feel that. That has to be in your vibe, in your illumination. Hence the setup of the slide before, right? Shal Hashem, pray in my name. Ruach, breath, Holy Spirit. So the word from Japanese is basically a form of meditation, basically entered into with attention to basic breath practice inside of 10 minutes. There's many levels of Satori. There's a word reverie, basically where you're kind of, it's almost like daydreaming. It's kind of an exalted state. It's where we also get the word reverent from. State of awe, like, whoa, dude, awesome. Except you're not saying anything, right? But that's the feeling. Alaha, sacred unity, the one who is above all, or above or within all others. Satana, adversary, that which distracts us from the unity, and it's actually synonymous with your ego, because In Yeshua's framework, Jews today, Jews back then, didn't believe in a hell, didn't believe in a hell, and didn't believe in a devil. It's not in their framework. Still isn't in their framework. So what Satana is basically, it's my ego that keeps me separated. Not some evil archangel, which we don't believe in any case.
I try to express something similar to this to people all the time, and they just don't get it.
So it's part of you which is generating the cravings. And the cravings are basically you're thinking that you're separated from what you need. When part of the reality at a higher level is you already have what you need. You just think you don't. All right, so trying to define mindfulness, which in DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, they talk about mindfulness, and there are some people that will have problems with some of the Buddhist aspects of this. So what I've tried to do is I ain't going to downplay it. I'm going to tell you where it came from, certainly. But mindfulness is being able to see what your mind, your thoughts, your emotions, and your programming are doing as it's happening in real time. And in order to do this, you can't necessarily be triggered. Triggers can happen, but you can watch them happen instead of being caught up in them. And decide to go where you're going to go if you have the skill to do that. Best way I can do this is, like, for example, I hope you were able to get those images of waves at Waimea, because the piece show them for whatever reason. All right? So if you're in the surf and there's a shore break that's basically, this room is about 8 feet. So the shore break, you're standing in water that's about a foot deep, and the wave is breaking over you 8 feet tall. If you're right next to it, there's certain things you can do, and running ain't one of them. Okay, so you have to basically dive into the water without thinking about it. You have to be enough to say, okay, I'm not going to panic. Go right into the thing that I'm afraid of. And that's a basic technique, just like I said about rule number 1 of the Jedi. You're surrounded, you're outnumbered. Attack the biggest thing immediately. Okay? Do the thing that you most fear. So in order to not be taken over by panic and freezing, you have to be mindful to do the course of action that will get you through whatever it is. Now, if you're in water that you have to swim in and a wave like that is coming after you, depending on where it is, you can time it so that you can surf it in or go deep enough so the wave won't affect you. Again, you have to be mindful in the situation so that these things actually become reflex when you do it. So when I'm talking about in a counseling situation, okay, depending on what you're in this business for and what your triggers are, sometime in your career you're going to meet you at a different stage, hopefully at an earlier stage. So you're going to have to deal with you. And what happens when you meet that person? Are you going to repeat the same mistakes that somebody did with you, or are you going to be better? Hopefully, be better, right? So trauma causes you to stuff your while in survival mode to handle the immediate crisis and focus on getting out of it safely. So you're not thinking, you're not necessarily being mindful. And so what happens then is every crisis like that, unless you're training yourself to be mindful, you're stuffing your feelings in panic mode. So in survival mode or PTSD, multi-generational trauma or post-slavery stress disorder, whichever framework you want to use, in the survival mode, those conditions is difficult to see into its workings, and thus your feelings can come out of it sideways, randomly and in an uncontrolled manner when you're triggered. At least using the surfing analogy, I can say, okay, you can swim out of this. If you get caught in a rip tide, that is a tide that's basically pulling you out to sea, swim parallel to the beach. And you'll be out of it because the rip tide only exists for about 20 feet. Swim sideways, you'll be out of it. And then you can swim to shore if that's what you're going to do. Right? But the tendency is to panic if you've either been pulled under. Undertows will pull you under, but they don't keep you under unless you panic. Riptides pull you out to sea. They don't stop pulling you out to sea if you swim sideways out of them, parallel to the beach. That means you have to have an orientation, right? Mindfulness is orientation. It's your shore. It's something solid in a chaotic emotional system. So, clients will be triggered. And you have to see that they are triggered and walk them through it and walk them out of it. Okay, this means you have to be able to do this for yourself, or at least be mindful enough to go into it with them and walk them out of it. So, for example, the breath practice is a real easy way to help you be mindful while vicariously experiencing the suffering of others without necessarily internalizing it, which, of course, you may do that anyway, because we are compassionate people. And when horrific stuff happens to people, we can't help but be outraged. So, for example, a little bit of theory. So, Wallace, 78. And again, with these theories, even though they're somewhat, the timing is somewhat dated, they're things that are timeless within them, so I just used that. So Wallace talked about a preferred defense structure, and he's basically talking about the client and the ego of the client. So treatment is designed to get around the defenses of the ego. So whether you use a Freudian framework, not that you know about this, but an Akbarian framework, which is basically African. So Freud's ego structure is superego, ego, and id. Okay? So y'all familiar with that, right? We talked about this. Have we not? All right. So it's strictly physical body focused. Personality, they were born, et cetera, et cetera. African framework says, okay, you have a spiritual dimension, that's where you came from, your soul. Soul isn't a religious term for us, it's a technical term for a condition, a connection. You have a soul, you have a physical body, you have a mind, you have social relationships, you have ancestral relationships. All those make a complete African person. That's not just specifically for us. We suggest that it happen to everyone, whether they acknowledge it or not. Just like natives say, everybody has a mission in life, whether you believe it or not. Tough luck if you don't, but you do. So find your mission. That's part of the healing, right? So the ego is who you think you are, generally identified with the body you inhabit while awake and its history. The ego's identification with the body is kind of like the address on the house. The numbers of the address are not the house. But people tend to identify with the number, not the house. Right? So, preferred defense structure of the alcoholic basically are tactics and strategies to protect the ego, that is denial. Okay? It's designed to basically, the addict's identification with a practice and a mode of dealing with emotional problems using a chemical or a process to shield them from the emotions of that particular thing. So they become that habit pattern rather than being a person that's applying that habit pattern. They can let that habit pattern go, but don't want to, because then what do I do? Who am I without this set of problems? Who am I? Well, you could find out or construct something else, because you took that on. You weren't born with a bottle in your mouth. What would that look like? So, denial, all or nothing thinking, conflict minimization or conflict avoidance, self-centered selective attention and memory. That means you don't necessarily remember all the things, or you are doing memory insertions. I talked about memory insertions?
So I have a question.
Huh? Go ahead.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
If somebody's mass psychosis, meth-induced one, what do you suggest, how do you help that person?
Well, I'll pick an easy one.
Okay.
Here's what a psychosis is from the point of view of the sane. It doesn't, but to say that it doesn't exist doesn't help, right? You can tell them, so for example, you haven't been to my office on main campus, but there was a time when building 19 didn't exist. Okay, so I could see from my office in building 1 to the tree line on main campus, and I had a tweaker come in who was kind of in meth psychosis. And he was swearing that there was a sniper in the top of the trees.
Right.
Okay? So he said, no, see, right? Can't you see it? And I was looking. Of course, I know there ain't nothing there, but he's seeing it, right? So what I know depending on how high he was, because I know the drug can do this, and if he hasn't slept for a while, then his mind is to manufacture stuff on consensus reality. So consensus reality is what we all agree is here, right? There ain't no pink elephant under my hand. Nice. Okay? There ain't no pink elephant there in consensus reality. So if I'm pretending I'm either doing method acting or I'm crazy, right? You have to accept the fact that they think it's real, but you have to also mirror that this is the drug doing this, and depending on the drug, you may or may not be able to convince them. So for example, I'm going to switch drugs for a second, okay? LSD modifies consensus reality. So you can actually see stuff on top of consensus reality, but consensus reality is there. And you can separate, because of the neurochemical pathway, you can separate that this is I'm tripping. Okay? You can actually do that. But with a dissociative anesthetic like ketamine or PCP, it's a total reality. They're dissociative anesthetics with a psychedelic side effect, which says, oh, I can actually see this. You actually look like a monster. Oh, danger, danger, I'm going to stab you, even though you're my best friend. The drug actually morphs you, all right? So in meth psychosis, it's very similar to that. So I can say, okay, look, I can say, you ever seen a Christmas tree? And you go, Christmas tree? Okay, that's a line of firs, basically a Christmas tree. So the Christmas tree is either a small tree or it's like a small tree that it's grown up from the ground, so that by the time it's like 75 feet, like a Christmas tree, right? You can't stand up in that and aim a rifle. You'd have to be standing there like the tree. And you can't wave. Look, you see the breeze blowing? Yeah, okay. The tree's moving. There's nobody up there, but if there was, why would they take a shot from up there? Why are people in your neighborhood at the top of telephone poles hunting you? Why are you so important? Why wouldn't they just come up and just blast you? Right? Because hitmen are expensive. So you try and use some rationality, and I'm improvising from, no, there ain't no sniper there. And why are you so important that sniper is a skill set? It's an expensive skill set. Look, I can hire a team streets of Eugene for $1,500 to beat you up, put you in the hospital, or kill you. right? So hitman is kind of like an expensive thing, right? And they know that because they know people like that, right? So what you try and do is you try and model a model of reality if they'll hear that and talk them down. But you might not be able to because they're not rational. And so you try and simplify and allay their fears, and it may or may not be possible, depending.